How has Blake Griffin improved his shot so dramatically? What is the definition of an open shot? Are the Clippers a serious contender? The only question left is, say it with me, you win. Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown Podcast. Today I am really excited to have Dave Severns on the show, who is currently the pro personnel scout for the Los Angeles Clippers and has spent basically his whole life around the NBA and helping players improve and work on the court and scouting and everything. So Dave, thanks for coming on the show. I can't wait to talk to you.
Oh, you're welcome, Nick. Thanks for having me. And I just got to say, I haven't spent my whole life around the NBA, only the last 10 years.
Well, when you were like what, 30 years old, then that's a third of your life.
I wish I was 30. Just double that, and then you got me.
No, all right. Well, we won't get into how we won't reveal anyone's age here. But either way, how about we talk about shooting in the NBA?
Okay. Well, yeah, it's you hear so many coaches and analysts and things say, it's a make-miss league, and it sounds very simple, but it really is. I mean, a lot of it comes down to who can create their own shot, who can make open shots, and who can create an open shot for somebody else. It's so much a part of the NBA is being able to make open shots and be able to create shots for yourself or others. It's a simple thing that we say, but there's so much truth to it.
So, when you were working with the Clippers, obviously you had Chris Paul there for all those years. And is it safe to say that he's probably one of the best, maybe, I don't know, of all time, for creating shots for others?
Yes, he is. There's no doubt that his vision, his passing ability, his creativity with the ball, he's one of the best that I see at creating a shot for others, whether it be an open jump shot, a lob, or a guy coming off a screen. Chris is probably, top 5 all time in being able to get guys good shots, place the ball where it needs to be placed, on time, on target.
I don't think that he gets enough credit for that last part you just said, because I remember I ran into J.J. Redick right when he signed with the Clippers in the airport, and I just started chatting with him. I said, are you prepared for the pass to be right on your numbers every single time? And I'm wondering, you were around him and saw how he trained. Like, is there anything particularly that Chris Paul did to be able to develop first of all, the accuracy, but then the timing of those passes?
Not really. I think it's just kind of natural. I think it's just a gift. I was around Chris when he was a young player at Wake Forest a little bit, and he's kind of always had that ability just to put the ball, it's kind of like a quarterback who can put the ball, right in that tight window. Chris has always had the ability to do that.
So I wonder if it's also just a notion of focus on doing that, whereas maybe other players, everything's going so fast, they're just they're just throwing the ball, whereas maybe it's just not even like a practice thing. He just sort of on his mind says, I'm going to get it there, and that's enough.
Well, I don't know what he's thinking. All I know is he puts it right on the money. I think the great ones don't think about it; they just do it.
Yeah, okay. And I would agree with that. I've interviewed a lot of the great shooters in the past, and they also seem to me to not necessarily know exactly what they're doing. I mean, some of them do, but I would think that more often than not, they just sort of shot it and it went in, and they repeated. Yeah. What is your take on that kind of thing when you're training guys? You're talking about shooting. How much do you get into the nitty gritty of elbow and wrist and all that kind of stuff and feet, or are you just sort of trying to get a flow and get the bigger picture going?
No, I think you need to break it down. But in saying that, as you're breaking the shot down, you can't get it to the position where you're trying to focus and adjust 5 or 6 or 7 things. Mm-hmm. I think 1 or 2 things really need to be emphasized. It may be getting the elbow above your eyebrow. It may be, getting the ball into the shooting pocket. It may be something with your hands or with your feet or your legs. But I think if you start combining, 5, 6, 7 things, you're going to put too much into their head. When you break down shooting, I really think that it needs to be 1 or 2 key teaching points. And along with teaching points, I think you need to have, maybe some verbal clues that can help the guys. But if you overload them with, 6, 7 different things, hey, your foot, your toe, your hand, your wrist, your this, your that, you're gonna put too much into their head. So, 1 or 2 simple teaching points, and then build from there.
With your time around the Clippers on the court, was there ever, something you said that blew you away that you saw maybe another coach do or a player doing it when they're training that said, man, that's awesome, that's an amazing drill, or that's a great little tip or a specific point? Is that ever anything crossing your mind when you think about that?
To be honest with you, off the top of my head, I'd have to say no.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. Being around a lot of very good coaches and things like that, but specific things, I'd have to probably think about that a little bit.
All right. Well, no worries. How much shooting, being around the Clippers, how much shooting do they do? I'm going to check it out right now. But as far as where they rank as shooting in the last several years, do you think that they, are they shooting every day in practice as a team, or does it have to be all individual? How does that work with the coaching staff?
Well, it's just not our team. Every team, whether it be individually or as a team, does a lot of shooting. I would say, especially in the time that's not team practice time, which is development time or individual time, whatever you want to call it. I'd say probably 80 to 90% of that time is spent on shooting. Mm-hmm. Team practice time, there may be a couple shooting drills, with the team to get guys warmed up or whatever. But once you're into practice with the team, there's so much other stuff that needs to be covered. So most of the shooting, with every team, I'd say pretty much the case, is done individually, and it's a lot. Trust me, you'd be amazed at how much time goes into shooting, and especially with the good shooters. Take a guy like JJ. The stuff that he does just doesn't happen. Kyle Korver, guys like that. You'd be amazed at the amount of time Jamal Crawford, Kevin Durant, Curry, Thompson put into individual shooting. Those guys get a ton of shots up. And so that's, to answer your question, most of it's done on an individual basis.
And when you're talking about a ton of shots, you're talking about they're not just sort of standing still and someone just throwing it to them from the basket area.
No, it's to be effective and to be able to progress your shooting, it's got to be game situations, it's got to be game-like.
Yeah.
Now, there's a time and place for, spot shooting, of course. But, to really get improvement, it's got to be game speed, game shots. And it's got to be assimilated like that to be able to be effective.
I have an interesting question for you. You might have to rack your brains a little bit because when you look at the 3-point percentage of the Clippers over the last several years, they're top 7, top 8 every year. In 2013-14, however, they were very bad. They were way down. Let's see, 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24. They were 22nd in the league in 2013-14. And then all of a sudden in 14-15, they make this rocket jump and then stay there for that up until this year. Can you remember what happened? Because J.J. Redick was on the team in 13-14, but do you know what happened? Was there a difference? Did anyone do something differently that suddenly made that jump?
No, I'd have to look at the roster and see who we have on the team.
Okay.
And the difference between one year to the next on the roster, and I'm sure that has almost everything to do with it.
Okay, so you think it's more about personnel versus all of a sudden they changed something that they did? No.
It's more about personnel to me than a guy all of a sudden, totally changed the way he shoots. I would say it's almost roster driven.
Okay. So here's another question then.
The players are the most important thing. It's like who you got.
Right. Fair enough. Well, let me ask you this then. Do you believe that can players actually improve on shooting as they go through their careers?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Oh, there's no problem. There's no question, and we've seen many examples of that in the league. And one example is our guy Blake. When he came in, I had him when he was a rookie, when he was coming off a knee injury, and he hadn't played yet. And you go on the court with him for his shooting, and it was just wow. He didn't have any feel for shooting, and through his determination and work ethic, we could see where he is now. Look at this year's 3-point percentage is off the chart. Now, I know it's early in the year, we're going to play 3 games, but he's really, really improved his shot over the last 8 or 9 years, however long he's been in the league. And it started off with the mid-range shot. And through hard work and just persistence, He's now gotten to the point where he's a pretty good three-point shooter, and you have to honor that. So, yes, guys can improve. I have seen guys improve. And he's just a great example of that.
Absolutely. It's interesting because for a few years now, they've been talking about him needing to shoot more threes and space the floor better. Did you feel that was a significant issue the last 3 or 4 years with Chris Paul and the team as it constituted, that he was not spacing the floor well enough?
Well, I don't know if it was an issue. It was something we would have liked to have seen happen, but he just wasn't ready yet. He wasn't comfortable yet. 3 or 4 years ago, he wasn't ready to step out and shoot pop threes, trail threes, and now he is. And that's through all the hard work that he puts in. He gets the credit, for putting in that hard work. And I really feel in the NBA, to be successful, you have to have a big that can shoot threes. It's really difficult to play with your 4 and your 5, and neither can step out and stretch the floor and space the floor. So that's really going to help our team by having him, stay consistent with the three-point shooting. I really feel that's important.
Yeah, I mean, he hit a step back off the dribble three last night with a guy in his jersey, and
he's done that about 3 or 4 times this year. That wasn't the first time that's happened.
So what is that telling you?
Well, it tells me that he has the confidence to take that shot. And what I liked last night, for example, was, normally Blake in the fourth quarter in a close game doesn't want to shoot those. Doesn't have the confidence to shoot them in the past. And you saw last night in the fourth quarter of a big game, they cut a big lead down to 6. Mm-hmm. And Blake shoots that step back 3 in the fourth quarter to put us up 9, and that was basically the game. And 4 or 5 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, you wouldn't have seen him take that shot. He didn't have the confidence to take it. He would have tried to put his head down and drive the ball and play what we call bully ball. But for him to make that shot in the fourth quarter of a relatively close game, I think shows his progress and the confidence that he has.
And now, have you observed anything different? Because it's pretty significant. He's actually taking 6 threes a game, which is jaw-dropping to me. And he's making 44%. It was a little bit higher than that, and obviously we think it'll probably level off a little bit. And by the way, what's your prediction? Do you feel like he's going to stay elite 40% on 6 attempts per game?
Well, I think you'll see the 6 attempts stay. I think realistically Blake's probably around 38, 39%, right around in there. Once we get into a 20, 25 game sample size, I think you'll see that 38, 39% would be really good.
Yeah.
And I think he's got the capability to do that. I mean, he's just, the hitch is starting to go away. It's so much smoother. He used to shoot the ball on the way down a little bit, and now he's a lot smoother. It's more one motion. And up until last night, I believe he had not missed a free throw, and he missed 2 in a row. He was really upset with himself. Mm-hmm. But his free throws have also become really good.
Yeah, now it's that rhythm that I've complained about for years, and shooting on the way down. What's the cue for that? If you got a guy who's been doing it his whole life, what do you say to him? What helps him to smooth it out?
Well, one of the things Blake had, he had a shooting coach with him for us, I don't know, for maybe 4 or 5 years. And one of the verbal clues that the coach always stressed with Blake was let it go, let it go, let it go. And, that kind of gave him a verbal clue of not to have the hit, just let it go, one motion. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really been great for Blake. And now, to be honest with you, he doesn't need a shooting coach. He's his own best coach. He spent so much time with our shooting coach in 4 or 5 years that now he understands his shot so much, and more than anybody, that he's able to make the adjustments. And I think that's what you want to do as a shooter is get to the point where you can become your own best shooting coach and make the adjustments as you see them and as you feel them need to be made. And Blake's at that point now.
Well, yeah, that's great to know. I mean, certainly with the free throws too, I'm sure he's as much of an expert as anybody at this point. And you can be an expert too if you head over to DraftKings.com to play daily fantasy. You can be part of the action every night when you choose between public contests with big cash prizes or private contests where you can take on your friends. If you're a beginner or a casual fantasy player, they've got a contest for you as well. Drafting your team is simple. Pick 8 players and stay under the salary cap. something Doc Rivers is going to have a hard time doing with DeAndre Jordan pretty soon. You earn points for scoring, assists, blocks, rebounds, and lots of other stats. There's no better way to turn your love of basketball into cash in your pocket. And there's no commitment. Each day is a new contest. So hurry to DraftKings.com now and use code CoachNick to play free with your first deposit for your share of $10,000 in total prizes tonight. That's code CoachNick to play for free with your first deposit. Only at DraftKings. The game inside the game. You know, it's funny, your era of coaching, it's nice to hear you, kind of reference rhythm and one motion shooting and the other things that we talked about in the past about, some of the newer fundamentals of the shot, because it feels like a lot of guys who are who started out coaching or learned the game in the 80s or maybe early 90s seem to have a real resistance to looking at shooting in the way that you and I look at it. And I'm wondering, what about that, makes people so resistant to wanting to update the techniques?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know. I just know what I know, and I know what I've learned from guys that I really respect and trust and have seen results from in the past. I grew up in high school and playing the game in college in the 70s, mid to late 70s. So I go way back, and I was always taught, and we've always tried to emphasize, the one motion shot and the 1-2 with the feet, and those being probably the two most important things. And to speak on, the guys nowadays, I don't know, I can't comment on that. I really don't know what they think or what they feel.
Fair enough.
And there's a lot, there's a lot of different ways to teach everything. What works for. What works for one coach may not work for another coach, or work for one player may not work for another player. There's a lot of, and I've been really fortunate to be around coaches who coach different styles in different ways and handle players differently. So.
And by the way, that is true. I mean, I'm always in search of the universal truth to basketball, and I feel like every once in a while I stumble upon something that I feel like we could use across the board. But that is true. I don't want to. We're not going to yell at everybody and say, "Oh, you have to do it this one way."
No.
But certainly that is interesting when we're talking about how we teach this stuff. Let me ask you this, and I'm curious, this comes up a lot about spacing, and I mentioned it earlier about how there was always that criticism with Blake shooting, these long mid-range and not spacing the floor. What is the difference, though, between where would a defender be guarding Blake on the weak side versus a good three-point shooter? Isn't it just like a step difference, maybe a step and a half?
It's probably about 2 feet, but in the NBA, 2 feet is a huge difference. That's the difference between having an open look for a split second or having a contested look for that split second. So, the ability to shoot out at the three-point line, it makes that defender, maybe just a foot or two closer or a foot or two further away on his closeout. And that little bit of space really makes a huge difference.
Really? Okay. And that's the other thing is I think people don't understand, especially at the pro level, what an open shot really is, because they'll think that it's contested when I'm showing them that, it's not. It's really open. Now, the way I kind of do it is, on the catch, if it's a catch and shoot, let's say for three, if he's got a clear look at the rim on the catch, that to me is an open shot. Do you agree with that?
Yes. And there's going to be a guy running at you. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a guy. Very rarely do you get just a wide open shot with nobody closing at you. But to me, when he catches the ball and he has a good look and he has good footwork, regardless of really where the defender is, if he's got that good look at the rim, he's going to get a shot off. Guys who get their very rarely do you see in the NBA a guy get his 3-point shot blocked.
Right.
Is that true? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
I mean, very rarely. I mean, if they just have that feel to where if I feel I'm going to get this shot blocked and the closeout is coming at me, I'm going to drive it. I mean, it's not something you can. It's just kind of a feel. You got to drill it with guys, and they got to know when I'm open and when I'm not. Mm-hmm. And very rarely do you see a contested 3-point shot blocked.
Yeah, and another reason
If
why.
if a guy gets the block continuously, he's not very good.
Right. And another reason why
league.
you have to drill it live. Like, there's no other way to learn how to read that, in my mind, than to do it live with a guy closing out, and you slowly feel, okay, this is hard. Now, this is a great question I want to ask you because it's related to this. What about the closeout actually affects the shot? You said that, we don't often block shots from the three-point land, so it's not often the maybe I don't think it's the fear of the block, but what do you think the closeout actually does to affect the shot to the point where it misses?
Well, with good players, it doesn't affect them at all.
Okay.
I mean, I can almost guarantee you, if you talk to the really good shooters in the league, they would say, I'm not affected at all by that closeout. That doesn't bother me at all. I don't really even see the guy coming at me. All I see is the rim. My eyes are on the rim, and I'm focused on that. I bet you most of the guys would say that.
Okay.
So the closeout. Now, what the effect that the defensive coaches want is they want the effect of the closeout to be running the guy off the line and making him dribble, putting that little bit of indecision into his head. If you run a three-point shooter off the line and made him dribble into a two, you've done your job.
Okay. So, and interesting enough,
sense?
Yeah, but what we see now is the shot fake, sidestep, dribble, and then they still shoot the three, which is a very legitimate, fundamental. Because I've asked a lot of these shooters, and oftentimes they don't even see the rim. The guy, because that's the other question is, okay, if it's not a fear of the block, then the hand is up, and they want to challenge in the air. That seems to be what everyone wants to do now. So the hand up being like would obscure the vision of the rim. So I started to wonder, okay, well, maybe that is part of it as well. Although I think, would you agree that a lot of the good shooters would say that doesn't matter either?
I would say you're absolutely right. And the sidestep has become a skill that perimeter guys have utilized to be able to, if the guy runs you off the line, you can still get a three-point shot by using the slide dribble or side dribble, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that you see being taught now. And you probably Steph Curry is the best guy in the league at the shot fake, and then a little slide dribble to the left or to the right, usually to the left because the guy's running at your right hand.
Yeah.
So I think you see that's a skill that's really being taught now, is that side dribble.
Yeah, to the point where it's weird when I see a one dribble pull up now off a shot fake at like 18 feet or 15 feet. It's weird. It doesn't look strange now, and yet I don't know what happened to a 15-footer. So suddenly it seems to me any shot taken from outside of 10 feet and inside of 23 is a mid-range shot. I don't know how that happened. Shouldn't mid-range be like the 15-footer? Isn't that what we still would want to get ultimately?
Well, to me, a mid-range shot is anywhere from about 15 feet to about, to 20 feet, right in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're seeing now more and more of, instead of the mid-range 15-footer, once guys get in there off a shot fake or off a pick and roll, is the runner or the floater. You don't see a lot of real pull-up jump shots. I mean, I saw a lot the last 6 years with Chris, because that was his best shot. He was number one in the league on those pull-up jump shots from about 15 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of guys today, you'll see from 15 feet, 14 feet, anywhere around the free throw line, guys are shooting a runner off either 2 feet, which I call a floater, or off 1 foot, which I call a runner. You see a lot of that now instead of just the traditional, pull up 1-2 with your feet into the jump shot.
Do you have a preference between a 1 foot, a runner, or a floater?
I do not. I teach both and let the guys figure it out from there. If you're going to teach the 1-footed runner off of 1 foot, you need to shoot the ball just like you would a jump shot. Steve Nash was great at it. You can imagine in your mind jumping off your left foot and shooting a regular jump shot. But you got to teach them when you jump off that left foot, it's a high jump. It's not a long jump to avoid the charge.
Yeah.
Now, when you teach the floater, which is more off 2 feet, and you release the ball more like a knuckleball to get a soft roll on the rim, it's not a jump shot release. It's more of a two-hand floater release or a one-hand release that you see a lot of guys use. So I teach them both and let the guys figure out, what's most comfortable for them. I remember when Derek was a real young player, we had him his first year, and when we started working with Derek on floaters and stuff, and he, I said, what do you prefer? He goes, I don't know. I just get in there and do it.
Yeah.
So his preference was to go off 2 feet and shoot the actual floater with very little spin and rotation on the ball to be able to get a soft.
Wait, which Derek are we talking about?
Rose. Derek Rose,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that Derek Rose would say he doesn't really know or has a preference. It seems like he is just all feel. And I would argue it might help him to get a little bit more focus on.
Well, instinct is such a huge part of this game.
Yeah.
And if a player is successful with his instincts, don't mess with him.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about.
If he's successful. If he's not, then you might have to tweak some things.
Okay. Well, have you watched Markelle Fultz shoot free throws?
Yeah, I don't like it. I'm gonna be honest. And their shooting coach is a really good friend of mine. And I talk to them a lot, and they're working on it. They're going to get him. They're going to get him right. Now, we weren't aware of the shoulder problem either.
Right. All right. So we'll lay off him because of the shoulder.
Yeah. I mean, we'll revisit him in a few months and see how he's doing.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. All right. So, but let me ask you this. Okay. So the thing that drove me crazy the most about the Clippers, and I worry that the Clippers are mad at me because I'll do this on Twitter a lot, is I'll show the Blake Griffin post up.
Hey, trust me, they don't get mad. They're worried about that. They're worried about the next game. They're not worried about what we say on Twitter.
Oh, fair enough. And then, well, although who knows if the PR people aren't there, but if they are, I love.
No.
You know, and by the way, we got to get into Teodosic in a minute, but I did a video I think last year about the Blake Griffin post up problem, and the irony is that he's generally on the top of the efficiency for post ups, but you know. Have you ever had to work with him or try to work with him on the post-up and sort of the notion where he likes to jump while his back is still at the basket and then somehow twists to try and get the ball to go in?
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
We work with Blake. Well, I don't like it. I think it leads to off-balance shots and turnovers, but, it's just something that he does. That's just something that he does, and I think it's a bad habit that he's got to get rid of. Now, and watching him this year, I haven't seen that yet. Out of this post game. I've seen some very efficient footwork and finishes this year, especially off the left block. I mean, last night 2 or 3 times he just punished Derek Favors.
Mm-hmm.
And where Blake gets in trouble is when he tries to play bully ball and bang, 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 instead of just facing up quick or going quick off a face up or just going quick off a back to the basket. Because with his strength and quickness, nobody can guard him.
Right.
Where he gets into trouble is, like you said, when he tries to go off balance and the 1 foot and the bully ball type stuff. And also, he handled the double teams pretty good last night because he's such a great passer. And not only last night, but earlier in the year also.
Yeah, listen, he is in the MVP discussion right now. I mean, he really is, especially if the Clippers.
Hey, whoa. We played 3 games.
Hey, listen, this is the time to be irrational.
Don't get me wrong. I love him, and I hope he's up there in the discussion. But come on.
All right, hey Dave,
there's probably 20 guys you could say right now. Oh, he's in the discussion.
Right. I already did a video on Giannis. He's dropped the gauntlet, and he is. You've seen his numbers, right?
Yeah, he's a pretty good player.
He's pretty good, yeah. So, but hey, a good start to the season can kind of catapult you through. The narrative gets hold, and then all of a sudden. But, I think part of the deal is they're 3-0. They look very good. And I think people were writing the Clippers off. It felt like they thought maybe they wouldn't even make the playoffs this year, or they'd be down in the 6, 7, 8 seed. If they finish higher than that, that's going to be the biggest argument he has. Even though last year we saw it didn't necessarily matter what the record was, I think if they finish high, that'll really catapult him in that discussion. Right? I have to imagine.
Well, I think anybody that's being considered for that award has to have a good team, a winning team. A top 4 team. What was the exception? Was probably last year with Russell. Russell, right? I don't know what they finished. They weren't in the top 4, I don't believe.
No.
But that was kind of an outlier year. But that definitely will help. And our team's pretty good. I'm telling you, I'm very encouraged by the way they played early on, especially defensively. Now, we haven't played the toughest schedule, and we've been at home for 3 games, even though the Lakers game was their home game. It was in our building.
Right.
So, but I've encouraged what I see early. especially defensively. And the other thing is the ball movement has been really good. Chris was a ball dominant point guard and one of the best. But we've got guys now that I think enjoy moving the ball a little bit more, and I think you're seeing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the whispers are out there a little bit about that. Let me ask you about that because what we can see on the court as far as Chris Paul. First of all, I mean, I've considered him the gold standard of point guard play for his entire career. He does get on his players though. I mean, is it safe to say that he can be a tough teammate?
I think that's safe to say, but that probably better put is he is a teammate that holds other teammates accountable. Now, that accountability can get under guys' skin a little bit, if you know what I mean. But he definitely holds them accountable, and himself as well. He's hard on himself too. I've seen him be really down and on his play, and his not being able to come through, when we needed him to in the clutch. So yeah, he is tough on guys. But you know what? So what? Take it. Play better.
Okay. Well, is there the fear that kind of wears on you after enough years and it kind of loses its impact?
I don't know if there's a fear, but it probably does lose its message and its impact, after a few years.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you what, I'd go to war with that kid anytime.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because there were a couple instances in the past in those playoffs, different playoffs in and around, that I could picture that, he did, I don't know if it loses SHIT or whatever you want to say, but he kind of just sort of, I think what's shocking about that, if he makes a mistake or a bad decision, is that because 99.9% of the time everything he does is perfect, it really kind of stands out sometimes. But would you say that that's a thing that is that a pressure thing that he doesn't handle well, or is that just sort of one of those things that happens over the course of a guy who's going to play hundreds of playoff games?
No, I don't think it's a pressure thing.
Okay.
He just had a couple of rough finishes to games in the playoffs. It's not a pressure thing. He thrives on that. He wants that, like most great players do.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about one of the replacements or the new players in the team because I don't think it's a secret that Milos Teodosic is, I think my favorite player maybe going anywhere. Really fun to watch him play. Do you respond the same way when you watched him play? I know he got hurt recently, and it's a huge bummer. And maybe you can tell us when he's coming back. But do you respond the same way that I do?
Well, it's funny because when we signed him, I'd never seen him play live. I'd just seen him a little bit on film. So I was really looking forward to training camp over in Hawaii and watching him for the first time. And it was interesting watching him those first 3 or 4 days because, the guy looks like he's just rolled out of bed, and kind of threw on his shorts and his sneakers and went over to the gym. Like old guys do on Saturday morning, they get up, they're 40 or whatever, and they go to the gym and they play pickup. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what he looks like. And then he gets out there, and his IQ just jumps off the page with the way he plays the game and the way he sees the game. He's one of the best late passers in the pick and roll that I've seen. And what I mean by late passer is he comes off the pick and he's just kind of not in a hurry. He lets the muddy water clear. And when the water clears, he makes the right play, whether it be a pocket pass, a skip pass, a lob pass, whatever. So he's one of the best at doing that. His vision is incredible. He's a great advanced passer. Once you hit him with the outlet, his eyes go right up the court, and he's able to advance it to a rim runner or a guy up on the wing. And he's a better shooter than I thought. I didn't know that he was that good of a shooter. They go under the screens. He can make the shot. He can hit the pull-up jump shot. Been very, very pleased with what I see so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think he deserved to start, even though I know Austin was hurt a little bit in the beginning, and he was. I mean, and what's nice about the way the team is set up is that he could probably be have a defensive challenge out there, or be challenged defensively, but still have the backup of guys like DeAndre behind him and Beverly that really kind of hide that a little bit. So. Let me ask you this: what do you think makes somebody like that have great vision? Do you want to chalk that up to just sort of natural ability, or is that can you teach that? You
can help improve it by film and by drill work, but 60 to 70% of it is feel, it's vision, it's natural. He reminds me a lot in the way he comes off the pick and roll of Pablo Prigioni, with his ability to make the late pass in the pick and roll and what I call the look-off pass. What I mean by that, imagine you're coming off a high pick and roll and the big's rolling. Now, the guy out of the corner lifts up.
Yep.
The opposite corner. Are you with me?
Yep.
Okay, now the point guard's eyes, if the point guard's eyes go to the roll man, but he hits hits the wing coming out of the corner, that's terrific. It's almost like the quarterback who looks off the safety with his eyes. Mm-hmm. Or imagine the point guard, he's coming off a high pick and roll, and his eyes go to the wing guy who's lifting up. But the pass goes to the big.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we call look-off pass.
Sure.
And both of those guys are terrific at looking off the defense and making the look-off pass in the pick and roll. So that's something, it's hard to drill, it's hard to teach. A lot of it is just natural ability.
Part of it also feels like you got to have the balls to do it, right? Like some of the passes he throws, I love when it's funny, we were actually listing all the different kind of passes there are in basketball. And you think, there's not that many, but when you really start thinking about it, and when you watch him play, there's probably like 40 to 50 different kind of passes you can throw. That underhand pass that he throws on the break, like, did he practice that? Did you notice him practicing that pass? On the court?
No, nobody practices that. That's natural. Now, when's the first time we saw that? The first time I ever saw that was Pete Maravich in the '60s.
Mm-hmm.
He would throw that. Well, go on YouTube and put in Pete Maravich. You'll see him throw that underhand long court pass and drop it right on the money. So,
Absolutely.
There's that. There's the two-hand advance pass. There's the overhead, soccer advance pass. There's all kinds, like you said. And it's just, the guy's creative. And creative guys, you can't stifle them. And creative guys aren't worried about making a mistake. They're creative. You think Mozart was worried about messing up with a note or something?
Right. No, I think that's it.
Right, you just do it, and you're creative and you let it flow and you live with the mistakes.
So that's an interesting question because young players and young people these days, I feel like, have a fear of mistakes. We see this like the millennial criticism, right? They don't want to even try to do it because they're fear. What they can then say is, well, it's okay, I didn't do it. I wasn't trying as hard as I could, or I wasn't going to do it. So I'm kind of curious, are you seeing that now? Is that sort of what's getting in the way, maybe young players, is that they have that fear, whereas Teodosic has that YOLO going on?
Well, I think the fear of making mistakes doesn't originate with the player. I think it originates with the coaches, because the coaches, aren't allowing them to make mistakes and be creative. They're the ones, getting all over them. And that stifles their creativity. I think the coaches are more to blame. You got to be able to live with some mistakes. Now, we're talking about a special player that has that kind of creativity and talent. You have to let those guys make mistakes, and you can't stifle them. And so I think the problem is with the coaches sometimes.
Yeah.
Not the players.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, positively, and really, that's a very poignant point, and it kind of makes me sad.
Now, there's probably a lot of coaches that are going to listen to this and say, "Oh man, he's crazy." That's not right.
Yeah,
we don't do that. Well, yes, we do.
Oh yeah,
we do it.
It's subtle too, and you're right. I mean, I used to remember I would have practices where I'd say, "Okay, only crazy passes in this whole practice. You have to throw the craziest pass you can for everything we do," and it was fun and kind of, it gets the season, change up the season a little bit and the energy. But every once in a while, like, oh, that's actually a viable thing. We should work on that. And I think that's the one thing I've learned is that, the harder you are at trying to be rote and stick to strict fundamentals, the worse it could get for you.
Yeah, and let me tell you, basketball to me is like jazz. I'm a big jazz music guy. And basketball is like jazz. It's not. I mean, to a point, it is dictated by regime and plays and X's and O's and it's structured. But to a large degree, it's improvised. It's jazz. I mean, there's a little bit of chord structure, but you kind of just take it to where you feel like it needs to go within that chord structure. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I know Phil Jackson's talked about that.
Oh, did he? Don't love me in with him.
Right.
But I agree. I agree with that. I mean, it's just so much like jazz music. You know, you just improvise and you let it kind of take you where it takes you within a structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's any other. Maybe soccer's like that a little bit. But that's what makes our game so great and so beautiful is that structure, but the ability to improvise and create within that structure. Hey, we're getting a little bit deep here now.
Hey, listen, well, we're in California, so, well.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, it's great to hear. I mean, I'm telling you, a lot of the guys I talked to from your era, which is just right behind, I'm right behind you, don't see the game that way. And it really is important. I think especially as we move forward with, this sort of, pacing and spacing and 3-point shooting and sort of wild game. Does this look different to you? I mean, I almost feel like is where we're going with the NBA and the style of play, and the Clippers are now, certainly now that Chris Paul is not there, like they're moving into that as well. Is it here to stay? Is this what we're going to happen? Is the game going to be even radically more different in 10 years from now? And do you like that?
Well, I love the style of play right now, but to answer your question, I think this game is cyclical, and I think at some point we may even go back to seeing, two traditional bigs back to the basket.
Huh.
It's possible. 10 years down the road, who knows? Did anybody 20 years ago see this coming?
Yeah.
See where? How about the game? I think I read that one of the highest scoring games, if not the highest scoring game in NBA history, or one of the highest scoring games. I think the team that scored the most points attempted something like 4 3-point shots.
Yeah, right.
I mean, did we see this coming where Houston's trying to shoot 53s a game? We didn't see that coming. So in 20 years or 15 years, maybe we're going to get back to 2 traditional bigs and pound the ball inside. Who knows? You can't predict where the game's going to go. I think all you can do is appreciate where it is. And right now, I appreciate it, and I love the way the game's being played. The traditional big is no more, okay, for now. Okay, it's a thing of the past. The way the bigs are effective in the NBA now is totally different than they were 20 years ago. And the guard play is different than it was 20 years ago as well. And a lot of it has to do with the rules.
Yeah, that's true. Well, okay, last question for you. The rise of 3-point shooting over the last 6 years or however it's been has been unprecedented. It's been crazy. It's changed the game. However,
yes,
the average 3-point percentage has really not moved up at all. Even though I think everyone would say we have a lot more 3-point shooters than ever before, and that's the focus. Why?
Defense. The defenses adjust too.
Mm-hmm.
The emphasis defensively to guard that 3-point line has really intensified, and it's become very, very important. So defensive coaches now are spending way more time on, number one, who the 3-point shooters are. Number two, positioning the defense to be able to take away the 3-point shots and run them off the line. And number three, the teaching of the defensive techniques on how to close out to a guy and run him off the line. All that's become really important defensively. So I think to answer your question, because the defenses adjust, and I think that's why you haven't seen the percentages rise parallel to the number of attempts.
But as we go forward, and as these 10-year-olds are now watching the game and modeling their training, and we'll have, I mean, I've been saying this for a little while. I think that, in 8 or 9 years, we're going to have a bunch of Steph Currys out there. Do you foresee that percentage simply will rise just because of that?
I don't know if it will or not, but I do have advice for those 10-year-olds you mentioned. Okay, your body is not ready for that yet.
Mm-hmm.
All right, your body's not ready for that 3-point shot yet. When you get to be 13 or 14, then you can start looking at that. But 8, 9, 10-year-olds who are out there just throwing the ball at the basket or catapulting it because they're not strong enough,
mm-hmm.
I think that's a real disservice. And youth coaches got to get on that. You youth coaches out there listening, if you got players that are under 12 or 13 and they're shooting threes with bad form and technique, you knock it off. Okay, so tell them no.
Yeah, and also
until they get stronger.
And they also need to have lower rims across the board for the younger players and smaller balls.
8-foot rims for sure until they're 10, 11 years old, no question.
Yeah, what I usually do is whatever
age.
age.
I got a whole laundry list of things that I think would improve youth basketball.
Oh, well, you know what?
That's just a couple of them.
let's get out there and march around and do this, because I also want to do. We need to standardize a lot more of this stuff, and I feel like I want to go on a crusade as well, because it's so frustrating to watch what's happening across the board. So, all right, you and I will get on that, and we'll figure out.
I have some very strong feelings on youth basketball, and what I mean by that is youth basketball is everything up until high school.
Okay. Yeah, me too. And I coached my kids, 6, 7-year-old, and then the 7-8s, and I hadn't done it that age for a long time. And I got some interesting insights into how that should work and what we should be doing and not. And all right, we're gonna put our heads together and we'll do something on that for sure. But Dave, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I mean, this is as insightful.
This is it. We're done.
Well, hey, I mean,
we're done already.
Come back, we got to keep it, somewhat, under a certain time. But no, come back. And by the way, we're going to get on the court and we're going to film some stuff too, right? You promise?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'd love to.
All right, great. Well, again, Dave Severns, the LA Clippers, he worked with players on the court. He's now their pro personnel scout, which I don't know how you do that kind of job. You must be traveling all over the place all the time, right?
About 50-50. Yeah, but it works out pretty well. But hey, you got to remember, I started as a 9th grade coach. Okay.
Okay. Well, the next show
started at this level.
The next show we'll go through how you started, because I want to hear that story too. So okay, we'll have you back on soon. Don't worry about it. We'll do it, and we'll get on the court and all those things. So thank you again for coming on the show. This was awesome.
Thank you, Nick.
And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Dave?
You bet.